How America under Trump learned to prey on itself. For much of the post-war era, the United States liked to imagine itself as history's most benign hegemon, powerful, certainly, but constrained by institutions, habits, and a sense, sometimes sincere, sometimes performative, of moral purpose. That self-image, argues Robert Kagan in a recent column for The Atlantic, has now collapsed. In barely a year, he writes, Donald Trump has dismantled what he calls the American order that was, turning the republic into something colder, harsher, and, most unsettlingly, predatory. Kagan's diagnosis is not merely about personality or policy. It is about regime characters. His argument, stripped of rhetorical flourish, is that America is ceasing to behave like a system governed by rules and beginning to act like a cartel, extractive at home, transactional abroad, and indifferent to the distinction between public interest and private gain. This transformation, he suggests, is not an accident. It is the logical outcome of a long-running erosion of liberal norms, suddenly accelerated by a leader who treats the state not as a trust but as a trophy. From order to opportunity, the American order Kagan mourns was never as pristine as its admirers pretend. It rested on compromises with segregation, imperial overreach, and corporate privilege. Yet it possessed three stabilizing features. First, institutions were understood to be semi-autonomous. Courts, regulators, and civil servants were expected, at least in principle, to operate independently of presidential whim. Second, power was mediated by norms. Presidents refrained from certain actions not because they were illegal, but because they were not done. Third, American hegemony was embedded in alliances and rules. Washington dominated, but it did so through treaties, institutions, and multilateral rituals that softened its dominance. This architecture did not prevent abuse. It merely made abuse costly. Under Trump, Kagan argues, those costs have collapsed. The system has been reconceived as a marketplace in which loyalty is rewarded, dissent is punished, and everything, from tariffs to prosecutions, can be priced. Order has given way to opportunity. The state as personal property. The defining feature of predatory systems is not cruelty. It is fungible, everything can be converted into advantage. Trump's governing style exemplifies this logic. Public offices become leveraged. Regulation becomes a bargaining chip. Foreign policy becomes a sequence of shakedowns. Allies are pressured for protection money in the form of defense spending or trade concessions. Domestic institutions are bent to shield friends and harass enemies. Legal procedures are treated as optional obstacles rather than binding constraints. In such a system, the line between corruption and governance dissolves. Influence is not hidden. It is advertised. The point is not to disguise self-interest, but to normalize it. Kagan's unsettling claim is that this is not a temporary deviation. It is a redefinition of the state's purpose, from the guardian of public goods to broker of private favors, the hollowing of authority. Paradoxically, predatory governance weakens the very power it seeks to monopolize. Institutions stripped of autonomy lose credibility. Regulators, seen as political enforcers, inspire neither trust nor compliance. Courts portrayed as partisan instruments lose their moral authority. The result is a form of strongman fragility, power concentrated at the top, legitimacy leaking everywhere else. Trump's America, in Kagan's telling, increasingly resembles this model. The presidency expands, but the state decays. Executive orders multiply, but administrative capacity erodes. Rhetoric grows louder as competence thins. Authority becomes performative rather than structural. This is why predatory systems are noisy. They rely on spectacle to compensate for institutional weakness. Foreign policy as extortion. Nowhere is the transformation more visible than abroad. The old American order treated alliances as long-term investments. They were costly, occasionally irritating, but strategically stabilizing. Trump recasts them as bad deals. Security guarantees are reframed as subsidies. Diplomacy becomes a transaction. Loyalty is measured in immediate returns. This approach mirrors the logic of organized protection rackets: pay up, or face uncertainty. Kagan's warning is that such behavior does not merely offend allies. It invites imitation. When the world's largest power abandons rules, others quickly learn that opportunism pays. The consequence is not multipolar harmony but competitive predation, a scramble in which states hedge, hoard, and harden. America becomes less a leader than a broker of instability. The moral economy of cynicism. Predatory systems survive by reshaping expectations. Citizens come to believe that everyone is corrupt, so corruption becomes tolerable. Loyalty replaces competence as the route to advancement. Public service has become naive. Trump's rhetoric accelerates this moral deflation. By portraying institutions as rigged and norms as fraudulent, he lowers the ethical bar. If the system is rotten, exploitation appears rational. Kagan's deeper anxiety lies here. Once cynicism is internalized, restoration becomes difficult. Norms cannot simply be reinstalled like software updates. They require belief. A society that learns to expect predation will eventually demand predators. Why it happened? Kagan does not claim Trump created this reality ex nihilo. He exploited existing fractures. Decades of polarization weakened cross-party restraint. Economic inequality bred resentment. Media fragmentation dissolved shared facts. Judicial politicization normalized institutional warfare. Trump assembled these fragments into a coherent style of rule, aggressive, transactional, unembarrassed. He did not invent illiberal impulses. He industrialized them. In this sense, his presidency resembles a hostile takeover of the American state, made possible by shareholders who had lost faith in management and no longer cared about long-term value. The limits of restoration. Optimists argue that institutions will rebound once Trump exits the stage. Kagan is skeptical. Damage of this kind is cumulative. Precedents linger. Temptations remain. Future leaders will remember how easily boundaries were crossed. A system that has learned to pray can always relearn the habit. Reform, therefore, requires more than personnel change. It demands cultural reconstruction, rebuilding trust, relegitimizing expertise, and reasserting the distinction between power and plunder. This is slow, unglamorous work, ill-suited to viral politics. The predator's paradox. Kagan's bleakest insight is also his most ironic. By turning America into a predatory state, Trump weakens the very dominance he celebrates. Extraction undermines productivity. Intimidation erodes cooperation. Short-term leverage destroys long-term influence. Predators consume their ecosystems. The American order once derived strength from restraint. Its successors mistake restraint for weakness and weakness for realism. They will discover, eventually, that unbounded power is brittle. Conclusion: the price of transactional empire. Kagan's essay is not about nostalgia for a perfect past. It is a warning about regime mutation. America is drifting from a rules-based hegemon toward a transactional empire, one that treats governance as deal-making and citizenship as collateral. Such systems can persist for years. They can even prosper briefly. But they corrode the foundations on which their power rests. The tragedy, Kagan suggests, is not that America is becoming less idealistic. It is becoming more rational in the narrowest, most impoverished sense, maximizing short-term gain while liquidating institutional capital. In doing so, it risks proving a grim historical lesson, that great republics rarely fall to enemies abroad. They more often learn, slowly and efficiently, how to prey on themselves.